In the world of medicine, where every decision can change lives, your peace of mind is crucial. This is where Pattern steps in. Imagine insurance made simple, fast, and personalized, just for you. With Pattern, you're not just getting disability and life insurance, you're insuring your future and protecting your greatest asset, your income. In the past 10 years, Pattern has transformed the way over 20,000 doctors secure their financial well-being. Discover the simplicity of securing your future at patternlife.com or click the link in the description. This is another two-parter, so make sure to check out parts 1 and 2. Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle.
Good afternoon. Today we're going to do something special on Bradley Block's Physician's Guide to Doctrine. And my name is Scott Abramson, by the way. I'm a retired physician. I'm a retired neurologist. I worked over 40 years in the Kaiser Permanente system in the San Francisco Bay Area. In retirement, I've listened to Brad's podcasts, and I've really enjoyed them. I've really liked them. And what I really like about Brad is I like his curiosity. He's really interested in what people have to say. And I like his listening skills. He really listens to people, and you can tell that by his follow-up questions. He's asking a follow-up question to something that he heard. And finally, I really like the way that Brad challenges his guests in a general way, but he challenges them. And I've often heard him say things like, okay, let me play devil's advocate here. Or saying something like, okay, if that is the fact, if A is A, let me ask you, what if? He always asks that what if questions. So and listening to these podcasts, I have so many questions I want to ask Brad. And now it's my time to ask him. And I'm really excited. So Brad, I've read your Miranda rights. Are we ready to go? One of the things is I've been so impressed with the diversity of your topics and the diversity of your guests. And I just wrote down a few of some of the recent podcasts that you did. And you did one on explaining financial planning and land flipping, the history of osteopathy, secrets of the medical traditions, quitting medicine. And here's one, do doctors make good parents? That was with Stephanie Pope. And navigating life as a heart transplant patient. So I think that gives a sense of the variety of topics that you have on your podcast. So let me ask you, how do you prepare for a podcast? How do you prepare your guests for a podcast? I mean, what do you tell them beforehand? Can you just take us a little bit through the process of what you do?
So one, I think what you're getting at is with the variety, one question would also be like, how do I even choose the topics? And there are a couple different ways that I choose the topics. One is social media, just someone that I may have encountered on social media. For instance, Dr. Aileen Gregosian, the one who is an intensivist who has a heart transplant, right? She's very active on social media. And I thought, man, she would be a great person to have on because I really want to know from her the whole doctor as patient experience. Like what can she teach us that changed her perspective from being a patient in this very, defining situation, right? So one place would be that. Another, sometimes people approach me. Actually, I think that's the way we might have met. I think you might have emailed me and then we started this, and this has become a great relationship because we have a lot of dialogue. So sometimes people approach me either themselves or through a publicist. And then sometimes I have a question that I want to ask because it's for my own life, something that's going on in my life that I want to have an answer to, whether it's in the exam room or out of the exam room. And so then I'll try and find an expert on that, either through social media or through other podcasts, something like that. And the last is, just assuming that my listeners would have questions maybe that I don't have. Like I'm going to be doing one that's coming up called The Physician's Guide to Divorce. I haven't done the interview yet. And my wife and I have a very great relationship. This is not, but I'm sure there are physicians out there who are, thinking about that stuff that's on their mind. So that's how I come up with the guests that I want to cover. And then as far as coming up with the questions and preparing, I will try and find other podcast interviews that I do. I'm a avid consumer. I don't just, what is it, the Hair Club for Men? I'm also a client, right? I'm not only the president of the Hair Club for Men, but I'm also a client. So I'm an avid consumer of podcasts. So it's funny, my friends sometimes ask me, what podcast do you listen to? And I'm like, just the one that my guests are on, because I spend every moment of my commute either listening to a parenting podcast, because that's really, something that I want to, not mess up my kids. So I listen to parenting podcasts, but aside from that, it's just stuff that my guests have done on other shows, because that helps me come up with questions. So one, there's the questions that I just come to mind off the bat. Two is listening to their content. Either if they've written a book, I'll listen to it if it's available on Audible, or I'll, skim through it quickly, or I will listen to other podcasts they've been on in order to come up with questions. And then the last is I go over them with my wife, who is not a physician. My wife has been in the culinary industry. She's now got her own baking, she teaches cooking classes now. And so she's not in the medical field at all. So I will ask her, because it gets a completely different perspective. And sometimes often those questions I use, certainly not all of them, I need to vet for what I think is, important to the physician experience. And it's, you can't know what it's like to be a physician without being a physician. So, she can't possibly understand everything that we go through. So I can't use all the questions, but she's got some great questions that I never would have thought of. So that's how I come up with the guests, and that's how I come up with the questions.
Wow. And Brad, I can attest to that, because when I was on your show, I had done these video vignettes. I had done 24 video vignettes, and each one was a couple of minutes, and I told a story. And actually, you had reviewed all those. You had actually went to the internet, you reviewed all those, you were familiar with them. And instead of just interviewing me as a person, I just thought it was brilliant. What you did is you just took 5 of those vignettes and you said, let me play those vignettes and just talk about it. So I can vouch for the fact that you do your homework.
Thank you. I try. I think that for the people that are like, I want this to be a casual conversation. I don't want to do too much preparation because I don't want it to be too structured.
Yeah.
It's not like, so I'll write the questions down. I'll put them in an order that seems natural.
Yeah.
And I'll send it to the person I'm interviewing for them to vet, just to make sure that, I'm not catching them off guard, or it's not a question they're not capable. It's not in their area of expertise. Like, give them an opportunity to vet it, maybe alter something. And then I'll send that to them. And sometimes they review it and sometimes not, but I don't necessarily go in that order. Like, the conversation still takes its twists and turns, and then it gives me fodder for the conversation. And often one question will just naturally lead into another. And so it seems like all of it's this flowing conversation, but it's because of the preparation that allows it to happen. Now, it doesn't always. There are certainly some non sequiturs in there where I'll ask a question and it'll just be an abrupt next question. And I'm working on it. And I appreciate everyone's patience, but that's how I'm able to make it work. And I think if you're not preparing like that, it's, I think it's important. I really think it's important.
Yeah. And that's fascinating that you actually run these questions or run these ideas by your wife, who's a non-physician, and get the opinion of her. Can you give us kind of an example about, what your wife might review one of these podcasts and say, oh no, Brad, don't ask that. Brad, how about asking this? Or Brad, this is a, kind of weird thing. Or boy, I'd really like to know this. Things that you hadn't thought of.
You know what? I can't think of any specific examples off the bat where of the questions she asked, but she's also my filter in real non-podcast life as well. Like, for instance, like someone recently emailed me because they were like, listen, I'm the PR person for this guest and I'd like them on the show. And I think they have a lot of expertise to offer your audience. And I looked at this person's book, and ultimately it was the appeal to nature fallacy. It was like healing through nature and all, which is, the appeal to nature fallacy is something that we've covered on the show a bunch of times, that like nature is somehow better for non-specific reasons. And my reply was that like, this person is completely anathema to what we cover on the show. In fact, like the entire book is based on a logical fallacy that nature is somehow better. And my wife was like, actually, why don't you just rephrase it so that you say, thank you for thinking of us, but this doesn't actually fit with, what we cover on the show. So there have been many text messages and emails that I've written that have been filtered through my wife and then come out much, more appropriate, a little more rough around the edges. And this is actually something I talk about on the show, that like she's some of the inspiration for why I even do this to begin with, because my social skills are not nearly what hers are. And that is, I'm never going to be what she is, but I can certainly be better than what I am now. It's learnable, it's teachable. And so that's the content that we try to cover, which was, amazing that you found me, because that's a lot of what you did in your career was, the human side of connecting better with your patients, connecting better, making sure the patient has making sure you're understanding them, making sure you're explaining things in such a way that they understand. Like one of my favorites was my Aunt Sally. I think that's what it was, right? Like your aunt, so there was, maybe her name wasn't Sally, but like,
I got it.
Yeah. Like she had a headache.
Oh yeah.
Very similar to yours. And and then using that, and there might not even be an Aunt Sally, but like explaining it in an anecdotal way.
Yeah.
There's a story and another person that they can then relate to, helps your patient conceptualize their own problem.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the title of that was My Wife Had That Too. Right. Okay. Yeah, that's right. But speaking of your social skills, Brad, I've heard you say this on your podcast that you'll go to a party, and at the end of the party, everybody is your wife's best friend. But you, on the other hand, will stand in the corner with a drink in your hand, a scowl on your face, because you don't want to talk to anybody. But let me ask you, with all the communication stuff and the, training that your wife and inspiration, have you gotten any better with that?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. So, but it's still not natural. Like I'm still, with each interaction, I am thinking like, what should I be saying next? What is going on with this person's facial expression? Was this the right thing to say? Should I take this in a different direction? Like it's not natural. It's forced, but it's practice. It's practice. Now, the other thing that I want to start doing based on interviews that I've done with some recent guests is I want to start going to some networking events, right? But now I'm going to a bunch of strangers. Now, am I going to be able to pull that off? And the answer is, I'm going to try. I'm going to try, and I'm going to try, and I'm going to try until I can make it work, because it's going to be practice. So I'm definitely better than I was. I'm miles ahead of when I was. And also, like, being cognizant of it was the first big step. Like recognizing that I'm not good at it. This is why. This is what I need to do to change. Like, it's helping. I'm doing better.
Good. And, people would look at you and they'd say, okay, here's a guy. He's a physician. He's talking to other physicians. He's talking to staff. He's talking to patients all day long. He's got this podcast thing. Boy, he's probably the world's greatest extrovert. Are you an extrovert or an introvert?
So I think it's funny. I think my wife is an introvert with amazing social skills. And I think I'm an extrovert with social anxiety. So I'm always the one who's trying to get us to go out and do stuff and be social.
Yeah.
And then I'm not good at it. She's the one who's always like, let's stay inside and, watch TV under a blanket and drink tea. Yeah. And so she's the introvert, but she's good at it. I'm the extrovert. I want those social interactions, and yet I'm still more challenged at it. So funny how that works out.
Yeah. Well, that's what they say. The definition of an introvert the introvert says the best thing about going out is coming home.
Coming back home. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you get nervous when you do these? Do you get butterflies?
No, not since episode 5, and the first one was with my brother. And so I didn't even know how, like the logistics of it, like, where are we going to put the mics?
Yeah.
I think we both had a drink in our hand to just help that social anxiety
Yeah.
a bit. But since then, no. And even if I have a guest who's like, supposedly a big deal, because it's like not getting nervous when I'm talking to patients.
Mhm.
Because this is, at a networking event, I'm going to be nervous because
Mhm.
I'm a fish out of water.
Yeah.
But, this is my tank.
Yeah.
This is
right.
my house.
Right.
Same as the exam room. The exam room is my house.
Right.
So
I've
yeah,
heard
no.
people describe this as, I'm an introvert basically, but I'm a situational extrovert. So that makes sense to me in a lot of ways. So let me ask you, now I've heard you tell the story about how you got into podcasting. And what the story you told was, you'd finish your training, finish your residency, you joined this big group of ENT doctors, and, you had your 2 exam rooms and you had your office. And all of a sudden you looked around, you saw these 2 exam rooms and you thought to yourself, my gosh, I got dizzy patient in one, I got somebody with a nosebleed, a runny nose, bloody nose in the other. Is this all there is? Is this going to be all there is to my life? And so what I want to do is take you back to that moment. At that moment, was it more of an intellectual, logical decision? Well, look, I've got so many hours in a day. I think maybe I could spend it here. Or was there an emotional component to this? Like, oh my God, I can't. It's like that movie, The Heartbreak Kid. He wakes up in the next morning after the honeymoon and sees his wife snoring and no makeup. And he says, oh my God, for the next 50 years, have I signed up for this? So take us back to that moment. Was there an emotional component to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like the embodiment of the epitome of the arrival fallacy, right? Like once I get there, then everything will be, no, I mean, I think there needs to be a what's next. I think there needs to be a next step in order to keep things interesting. So I think it was an emotional, like, oh, okay, well, there's always been something that was next. And now there isn't something that's next, like for the foreseeable future. Now, I didn't recognize all that there was out there, right? All the possibility out there, where it wasn't that it had to be what's next from the exam room. And I think the thing that physicians should realize is it can be what's next in addition to the exam room, right? Like, what have you got going now? Now, my life became very quickly, it was what else was going on. Like I met my wife a year into being, am I doing that math right? 2011, met her December of 2012. So a year and a half after I became an attending, I met my wife, and we very quickly, our relationship advanced very quickly, moved in together, got engaged, got married, had a kid, bought a house, had another kid. So like everything, all that stuff. But, that was separate and distinct. That wasn't professional. So I think for the listeners out there, if you find yourself stagnating, I think it shouldn't necessarily be, well, I need to leave medicine. I think it should be, well, what can I do in addition to it? Right? Either something that can gradually replace the income or something that you look forward to outside, something that you can incorporate into your practice. So you have to kind of find your own what's next, because up until then, it's all been laid out for us, right? That's one of the reasons I went into medicine. It was all laid out for me.
Exactly.
And then it wasn't anymore. And I think it's important to recognize that it isn't laid out for you, but there are things out there for you to find that you can get excited about.
Yeah. And so with these 2 professional aspects of your life, the clinic life, being a doctor in the clinic, and the podcasting, that's that you've fulfilled the what's next, and now you're just channeling each different enterprise and going further with that. Is that right? Did I get that?
Kind of. I mean, I'm also like, I'm looking to expand my medical expert witness work. So I'm trying to expand on that. I am expanding the podcast. I'm trying to run it more like it's turned into a business instead of a hobby. So it's the practice. And then within the practice, I'm trying to I can't do it all at the same time though. It ends up being too much. And then I've got to like, taper back a little. So, I do have my eye on, other things that I want to do within my practice, but that's gotta take a back seat because I'm putting so much into the podcast, but that's going to happen next. So I have my sights set on different things and different plans, not just A and B, but there's also now C. And, my wife and I just bought an investment property. So, and then D. So we've got that too. So a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah. And that's really, there's so many doctors that's come on podcasts and, you see writings and various blogs that are just so, are looking for something else. So really, you're not just talking the talk or having people talk the talk. You're walking the walk yourself about finding alternative pathways in addition to practicing medicine. So let me ask you this. So, you hear this, there's this kind of a mantra, like some people, there are some jobs that are just a job. There are some that are a career, and there are some that are a calling. And the people that just have a job, it's like the alarm goes off and, hit the snooze button and you just want to go back to sleep. Then there's what people that have the career, the alarm goes off and you wake up and you say, yeah, it's a pretty good job. I get a lot of respect. It's good, a good financial thing. Oh yeah, go to. And then there's those that have the calling. And those are the type of situations where you wake up before the alarm goes off. So let me ask you, in your clinical practice and your podcasting, how would you rate that? Is that a job, a career, or a calling? First, your clinical work.
It depends on the day.
Okay.
It ultimately, it's a fluid thing. I'm not going to be able to, pin me down.
Okay.
I certainly don't want one of my patients to listen to this and hear that it's a job, right?
Yeah.
That I saw them and it was on a job day, not a calling day.
Well, there's
right?
a career in the middle. I mean, there's a job, career, and calling. Yeah. Okay.
But I really think it depends on the day. I'm excited often for my patients to come in to see that they're doing well, or if they're not doing well, to help them to do better, right? So, and this has been, you have to, on those days where it's a job, you have to find a way to convince yourself that it's a calling. I think the patients need you to think of it that way. And it's iterative. Not every day is going to be your best day, but I think being cognizant of when you're thinking of it like a job, you can spin yourself in a way that, you can try to get more excited about it. Like I will force myself sometimes to be more animated than I would otherwise be. And I find myself then enjoying it more because the patients then feed off that energy. So I can't pin it down because it goes like some days I'll be like, I am so over this. I'm ready for this day to be done. Right. And then other days I'm like, all right, who's next? This is great. I'm excited. And career is somewhere in between, but it's all, I'm sorry, I couldn't answer the question. It's all of those things.
You did give a hint there, but any other advice to people on those days where your job is just a job? Is there any way, how can you advance it into a calling on those, bad hair days?
So I think for me, what's helped is realizing what I like about my job and hanging my hat on that. And so what I've realized that I really like is helping the patients understand how I'm thinking about their problem. Like that to me is what my job has become. And so, a patient will come in with a cold and you can think, oh, like I'm a specialist and they're coming to me like, you don't even see any doctor with a cold. Why are you wasting my time? Right? That's the job thought process, right? But the calling thought process is, what drove this patient to make this appointment? What about this problem? What about this worries them? And how can I help them think about it so that they don't need to come to see a doctor every time they have a cold. How can I help them think through this process themselves? I mean, that's for my particular specialty. That's not going to apply to everybody, but it's taken me 12 years to realize that's what I really like. And it helps me by feeling like I've really added value to their day. It helps me enjoy it more instead of just, it's another cold, like blah, right? But like, I'm not going to do anything. You're going to get better on your own. Like, what are you coming to see me for? Thinking, how can I add value? So that's what
That's beautiful, Brad. I really love that. It's like, learning to walk in your patient's shoes, asking them what's it like to, what brought you in? What did this? Yeah. What about the podcasting? Is that a calling for you?
Also, it goes back and forth.
Okay.
It goes back and forth because like recently, because I've increased the frequency of my podcast to twice a week, I end up, if my wife isn't teaching a cooking class and we don't have some evening obligation like a parent-teacher conference or something, and then I have an interview, if it's none of those things, it is few and far between that we just have like a night to hang out. I mean, yeah, I don't do any of this stuff on the weekends. We do have the weekends, but weekends, with our boys are 4, 5, and 7. Like we are exhausted on weekends when we are like, we are active.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And so then it's like, we get to hang out at night together. And we're just like, what are we watching tonight? We don't. So it would be nice sometimes, but then I get down here into the basement. This is my, my recording studio in my basement in the corner behind the stairs.
Yeah.
I'm the creature under the stairs in my house right now. And I get down here and then it becomes a calling, So even though I might be like, I'd love to just not do anything right now and put the kids to bed. And then we get to hang out and talk about our days, talk about our lives and what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Once I get down here, it does become a calling.
Yeah. Brad, I am amazed. I mean, so you're working as a full-time ENT doctor. You have 2 podcasts a week. You're looking into being an expert witness type thing. You bought this Airbnb house. You've got 3 kids. Right before we went on this podcast, you said, I made, I'm just reading a bedtime story to my kids. We're singing the songs. So, if I'm a little late, it's okay. And so I was wondering about this because a lot of the email exchanges that we had, it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. You were answering me at 2 or 3 in the morning. So I'm wondering about your work-life balance, how that's going. And let me ask you one question. What do you do for me time? And I'm not talking about family time. I'm talking about Brad block time. What do you do for Brad block time?
So it's funny, the podcast is kind of the Brad block time. So as much as I'm doing it as a business, it's still, it's a labor of love and it's a personal passion. And if it,
Okay.
So that's part of my time. In the morning, at the advice of my spine surgeon friend, I take, 15 minutes each morning to do yoga. My kids make fun of me. They say they hate yoga. And I think it's because the TV's on and it's yoga and it's not cartoons. I think that's why they say that. And then on the weekend, I have like an hour of exercise time. There is every Saturday and Sunday, or if it's a 3-day weekend, like my wife knows there's going to be an hour that I'm gone. And that's my exercise time. So that's my me time. Arguably, I should take more me time. My commute, 25 minutes in either direction. So I have 50 minutes where I am by myself. There could be more. And, and where, the work-life balance, it's funny because my perspective is like, I have so much time there I see all these other people on social media who are accomplishing so much. And then I compare myself to them. It's the whole comparison is the thief of joy. It's like, I feel like I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
Yes. I recognize how that sounds, right?
Yeah.
I am doing enough, but I feel like there are inefficiencies in my day where I'm just scrolling on social media that could be put to better use. So it sounds like I've got a lot, and I do, and I feel like I should do more,
Yeah.
but I shouldn't. So this has become a little bit of a therapy session. So thank you.
Well, I always suspected you were a silent slouch anyway, so you just confirmed it.
And the 2 a.m.
Yeah.
was I wasn't in the United States at the time. And so I was writing you
Okay.
back. I think I had woken up in the morning, and also you're in California. So I was in Switzerland at my mother-in-law's house and writing you. And there's a 6-hour difference from me to them, and there's a 3-hour difference. So it was a 9-hour time difference. So I think that's where some of that came from.
All right, I'm going to let you off on that one. So you mentioned, sometimes your patients might sort of sometimes watch these podcasts. Did patients give you feedback on these? And also, let me ask you, what about your colleagues? You've got like 200 colleagues in this ENT practice that you're at. Do they ever say, God, you had this guest on, what a jerk. Wow. Or, why didn't you ask him this? Or, how could you, what kind of feedback do you get from patients and colleagues?
So it's rare that a patient will find me like this. As much as they Google me for whatever reason, if they find it, they don't mention it. If they don't find it, I need to do something about my search engine optimization and make sure that it does come up. But, it's been few and far between that they do, that they have stumbled upon it and mentioned it. But my colleagues, I'll mention one by name, Dr. AJ Chikara, one of my favorite people in the world. He's a laryngologist at Port Jefferson on Long Island. He actually graduated from Georgetown, which is where I did my residency. So we know a bunch of people in common, although he was gone before I started. So I know he listens. So thank you, Dr. Chikara, for listening. One of my co-residents, Melissa Amorn, also one of my favorite people. She's out practicing otolaryngology in Northern California. She listens, so thank you. So I get, a text or an email every so often.
Yeah.
But no, this is not social media. This is anti-social media. This is broadcasting. You are just putting the message out there, and I'm not getting much feedback, actually. So yes, based on that, we're actually going to do a giveaway. And so the giveaway is once this episode is aired, for the next 2 weeks, if you email me, brad@physiciansguidetodoctoring.com with either a guest idea or a topic idea, something that you want to hear, email me and it'll go into, a little lottery and someone will get a Physician's Guide to Doctoring Yeti tumbler.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That was part 1 of 2. So make sure you stay tuned for part 2. Doctors dedicate our lives to caring for others. It's time someone took care of us. Visit patternlife.com to simplify your path to peace of mind. Patternlife.com, simplifying your insurance journey. Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means you either fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please share it or like it or comment on a social media post or write us a 5-star review. Something. It would really help me out. And maybe what you learned from this episode can help someone else too. The views expressed in this episode are those of the interviewer and interviewee and don't represent the views of their employer or even their significant other. Even though the magic of podcasting make it sound like I'm talking directly to you. This is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice or financial advice or really any advice. Thank us again for listening to the Physician's Guide to Doctoring.